Chapter 6, Glorious Biennials. On a Wednesday afternoon in June, Auntie was waiting for Zoe when she got off the bus. "I've been so excited for you to come this week," she said. "I can finally show you the third life cycle." It was still springtime, chilly out, and Auntie wrapped her arm around Zoe while they walked the garden. Zoe felt happy today. They were studying the solar system in school, and she was discovering her love of science. She and her auntie came around the barn. Zoe stopped short when her eyes met a brilliant yellow hedge that stretched the full length of the garden. It was spectacular. When they got close, she discovered the hedge was made up of thousands of tiny yellow flowers on thick blue-green stems. She had visited this part of the garden many times, but had never seen these flowers before. "What are these?" she asked. Auntie smiled. "I'll give you a hint. You helped me plant these last August." Zoe thought back to summer planting. At the time, it felt wrong to plant seeds in August, but she was assured that planting cold, hardy crops like kale, chard, beets, and carrots at the beginning of August meant they could harvest those young vegetables in November before the first snow. Her eyes wandered to the painted stick at the front of the row. It read, "Glorious Kale." Now she remembered playing with the little round seeds that rolled around in her palm like they had a mind of their own. She also remembered digging through the snow last winter to nibble on the strong-tasting dark leaves. "There's something wrong here. That row marker says kale, but these are flowers, and they don't look anything like kale." Auntie beamed. "Surprise! It is kale, right where we left it. And look what happened." Zoe could hardly believe those short kale plants from last fall could grow into this hedge that was taller than she was. "I don't get it. If kale makes flowers, why didn't it bloom last year?" Auntie clapped her hands. "You figured it out," she said. "It's the third life cycle. Kale blooms and makes its seed in its second year. It's a biennial, meaning 2 seasons. A biennial uses its first season to make roots and leaves, and the second season to grow flowers and seeds. Once her job of making seeds is done, the mother plant dies off, and the seeds are left to start the cycle all over again." Zoe was still trying to grasp the concept. "So, is kale the only biennial?" she asked, rolling the new word around in her mouth. "There are lots of biennials, like carrots, beets, and turnips. It's probably no surprise that they don't store energy in their roots to feed us. The roots that we find so delicious are also food for next year's flowers. But since these roots can't survive the winter, we have to dig them up and keep them cool in a root cellar until they can go back in the ground in the spring. So, if we don't eat the roots, we can replant them and get seeds," said Zoe. "Exactly. You plant the seed to get more root, and plant the roots to get more seeds." She shook her head and opened her journal. "Some plants are crazy," she said, and wrote, "Plant Life Cycle 3, Biennials. Year 1, Roots and Leaves. Year 2, Flowers and Seeds. Plant seeds to get roots. Plant roots to get more seeds." She knew that a little sketch of the kale flowers would help her remember them. Right away, she noticed how 4 yellow petals lay across from each other in pairs, like the design of the drama queen poppy. A tiny mason bee landed, nuzzled the flower, and took off before Zoe could add it to her drawing. She was disappointed until she looked up and saw lots of little bees landing on kale flowers, as if they all wanted to be in her drawing. Soon she was lost in the tiny world of insects, recording as much detail as she could. When the finishing touches were added to one last bee, Zoe snapped her journal closed and jumped to her feet, ready for the next activity. Auntie fished around in her pocket and pulled out her red-handled clippers. "Would you like to pick some wildflowers while I get our snack ready?" Zoe held out her hand and grinned. "I'd love to." She traded her journal for the clippers and turned toward the grassy meadow behind the barn. Once in the meadow, Zoe waded through the field of waist-high grass in search of flowers. Soon, she was surrounded by a sea of green that whooshed in the light breeze, and she felt a sudden jolt of happiness. She loved being on this adventure all by herself. She had almost forgotten about her mission when she spotted a patch of bright pink and magenta hidden just below the grass. She crouched and whispered, "Hello, beautiful flowers. Would you like to come with me?" The gentle breeze blew the blossoms toward her, and the flowers nodded as if to say yes. She reached down, snipped one of the stems, and smiled to the plant in gratitude. Stepping forward, she snipped another and another until her fist was full of pink and magenta. By then, she was deep in the meadow and had to retrace the path she had broken through the grass to find her way back. Auntie was delighted when Zoe came through the kitchen door with her pink bouquet. "You found sweet William flowers," she said. "What a treat. It must be Biennial Day today." A glass of milk and a plate of peanut butter cookies waited at her place. She handed over the bouquet without a word and made a beeline for her snack. Auntie filled a jar with cool, fresh water and placed the flowers in the center of the table so they could admire them. "Sweet William is another biennial," she said. "I planted those seeds 2 years ago, back when that part of the field was still under cultivation. They didn't bloom last year, and I forgot all about them. Now here they are in all their magenta glory." Zoe found it hard to imagine that anyone could have forgotten about planting these beautiful flowers. "Now that I think of it," said Auntie, biting into another cookie, "Sweet William is an excellent flower to help you understand how seeds are made." She turned and rummaged through a kitchen drawer until she found a small magnifying glass and handed it to Zoe, who had already opened her journal in anticipation of a lesson. Auntie plucked a single flower out of a cluster and put it on Zoe's open page. "Look closely, deep into the center of the flower, and tell me what you see." The magnifying glass made everything look distorted at first, and Zoe could only see the fringed magenta petals. Then things came into view. "Oh, I see a group of little white things like strings and threads coming out of the middle of the flower. The string ones are thick and plain white. The thready ones look like the capital letter T, and at the top of the T is magenta, just like the petals." Auntie grinned and nodded her approval. "Great descriptions. You're becoming quite the keen observer. You've just discovered the 2 parts needed for the plant to make seeds." Zoe's mouth dropped open. "Really?" She turned back to the magnifying glass. Auntie scooted closer. "The white string you described is the pistil. Think of the pistil as a tube leading into the ovary. The ovary is where the seeds are found." She pointed toward the flower. "If you look under the petals, you'll see a little bump at the top of the stem, which is the plant's ovary. Inside the ovary, the baby seeds are waiting to be pollinated so they can grow." Zoe laid down the magnifying glass and picked up her pencil. She drew the flower's details and wrote pistil and ovary, with little arrows to help her remember the words. Auntie examined the drawing. "The thready-shaped T's you drew are the stamens. If you study the top of the T through your magnifying glass, you will see that the top of the stamen looks fuzzy. The fuzz is made of thousands of tiny grains of pollen. Those pollen grains are waiting for a ride to the pistil of another flower so pollination can occur. Waiting for a ride? Asked Zoe. That's one way to look at it, said Auntie. Most pollen needs to travel away from the mother flower to find a different flower of its own kind to pollinate. Pollen has no way to travel on its own, so it has to hitch a ride. Mother Nature has designed a couple of different ways for pollen to travel. Go ahead and label your stamen and your pollen, Zoe, and then I'll tell you the story about how pollen gets a ride. Zoe was just finishing the label on her drawing when she heard her mom's car. She sighed. I guess pollen will have to get a ride next week. Auntie laughed, scooped the bouquet from the table, and caught Zoe in a hug. Bring these to your mom, and I'll see you next week.